Elephant.
Hello, everyone. This is a data-driven chat, and today I'm very happy to introduce Federico Botta, who is a lecturer in data science at the University of Exeter. He is also organizer of DataBeers at University of Warwick, which is a data science meeting. He will talk about it, hopefully. And also he is an academic editor of PLOS ONE journal. So this is one of the top interdisciplinary journals, which publishes all types of research, including data science research. So hello, Federico, how are you?
Hello, Ganna. I am good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. I'm glad to have you here with us today. Thanks a lot for finding the time. That's awesome.
So thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. So to kick off our discussion, I'm just going to ask you, how did you become interested in data science and machine learning? What was your personal journey? So how did you get into it? Because I know you studied physics, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? So can you tell us how?
Yes, that is correct.
So how did you decide, that data science is what I want to do?
Yeah, so as you said, currently I'm a lecturer in data science at the University of Exeter, where I work a lot on problems on using data derived from our interactions with technology, typically, so mobile phones and social media, to try and understand, let's say, broadly speaking, our behavior. But how did I get here? So as you said, I originally studied physics. My background is in the natural sciences. I think ever since I was at school, I was interested in, well, I guess let's say two things. One was understanding people, and one was understanding the world around us. So I think back then, maybe I decided that I was more interested in understanding the world. So then I ended up studying physics at university, where I was really interested in, understanding the physical world. So, like particles and atoms and, energy and so on, which is quite different from what I do now in a way. But the studies that I did back then, I think were very useful in, shaping the researcher I am now, but also in introducing me to the methods and a lot of the skills that I have now. So I did a lot of studies in, let's say, hardcore mathematical and statistical skills, which are becoming very useful in my research now, I guess. And then also I had quite a, let's say, different introduction to computer programming from what a more, let's say, traditional data scientist, even though I'm not sure there is such a thing as a traditional data scientist. But anyway, I studied computer programming from a physics perspective, which I think also helped me a lot in starting to get interested in programming. But then, after I did that, I was still interested in trying to understand people, and I was still interested in trying to understand systems that were made up of people, for instance. So I started focusing more my studies and my research on an area which is, is called complexity science, which is an area where people try to understand how you can understand complex systems. So what complex systems are systems made up of many different components, which can be anything. And in my case, they would be people, for instance. So how does a system like this made up of many different, let's say, interacting people behave? What can we learn from such a system? What are the typical features? What are the kind of emerging behaviors from these systems and so on? And so I started focusing in this area, and I guess I was quite lucky in the sense that I came into this field at the right time, at the right moment in time, because I came in this field where when a large amount of data on these type of things started appearing. So we now have lots of data on what people are doing. We know what people do online. We know what people do on social media.
Yeah, you have quite a lot of research on mobile devices and basically crowd tracking. All these types of things are really interesting. So
yeah, exactly. So there's lots of all of us basically now have a smartphone, or at least one. Some people even have more, and these smartphones collect lots of information about what we do. They collect where we are, they collect who we interact with, and we use lots of apps, and these apps again contain a lot of information on our behavior. So I came into this field when these data started becoming available, and I had the skills of mathematical and statistical skills that I had learned before, some programming skills, which is very important. And so I was able to kind of start analyzing this data to understand our behavior. So I guess that's the kind of the journey that has brought me where I am now.
Mm-hmm. So, a lot of people who are listening to this podcast are kind of aspiring data scientists. They want to get into the field. Can you give them some tips where to start, what to do based on your experience?
Yes, I think, well, first let me say that I think, being a data scientist in 2020, I think is a very exciting position to be in. There's lots of opportunities, both, in industry and also in academia. There's lots of
and you can work
on.
from home. Let's not forget, unlike in some
yes,
other.
exactly. Yeah, you can work from home. You only need a laptop or a powerful laptop potentially, but you can work from home relatively easily. So that's definitely an advantage in the current situation. Yeah, but so it's an exciting opportunity because there's lots of potential applications for data science in many fields. At the same time, I also think it's a very difficult position to be in because as maybe my journey has demonstrated, but also that of many other people. There's lots of skills that are involved in data science, and a lot of them are required. And so you kind of need to develop these skills. And so I think that, that can be quite, let's say, scary or daunting at the beginning. I think there's a couple of, skills that I would encourage. Well, I think every data scientist should have. And these are some form of training in, let's say, statistical methods, statistical skills. So in order to be a data scientist, you need to understand how to analyze data. And data often has to be analyzed using statistics. You need to understand how statistics and probability works. And then the second one, of course, is that of programming, because unless you work on theoretical methods of data science, otherwise you cannot do data science on pen and paper. Or very little can be done with pen and paper if you are analyzing large data sets. And so you need to be able to use a computer to program a computer to tell it what to do and how to analyze the data that you have. And so some skills of programming are essential. And then I think...
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
And then I was just going to say, then I think you just need to be open and flexible to learn about many different disciplines. So data science is a collection of methods to analyze data sets, but then you need to have the interest and expertise and the knowledge to apply these methods to a specific problem that you're interested in, or that some of your collaborators are, or some of your industry partners are interested in. And so you need to be able to kind of learn about that and be curious about not just knowing the method, but then not knowing what to apply it to.
I just want to kind of go a little bit deeper into what you said. So you said, well, you need all these skills. So how do you learn these skills? Would you advise people to take online courses or maybe enroll in a university degree course, or should they just pick a practical problem and try to find collaborators who are already, good coders and good data scientists? So, where do they start? Where do people start if they want to do these things?
That is an excellent question. I think all the suggestions that you mentioned are valid suggestions. Of course, let's say there's lots of online resources available at currently. There's lots of courses available on machine learning, courses on statistics, and even programming courses. So there's lots of courses online where you can learn how to use, say, Python for data science or R for data science, or so on. And so all of these are very valid and useful resources. So that's definitely one opportunity. University degrees, of course, are also very good at training you in the skills that you might need. But also, as you said, I guess being able to be open to acknowledging that you might not have the necessary skills in every specific aspect, because no one of us does. And so being able to ask someone else that has the skills that you're lacking to either teach you or work together with you to collaborate and managed to achieve a successful data science project together.
Awesome. So you worked on a wide variety of really cool projects, but if I asked you to pick, it's a trick question. So if I asked you to pick one you're most proud of, what would this project be? What would you pick?
Yes, I think there is a difficult question. I'm not sure I would pick a specific project, but I think one thing that I am, let's say, proud of, or that I am happy that I've been able to do so far in my career, is that of being able to interact a lot with policymakers, which I think is, in my opinion, is very important. And I've done it quite a bit, and I hope to do it even more going forward. I think it's very important to interact with, let's say, policymakers or governmental organizations, but also external stakeholders more generally, to, let's say, put my expertise in practice with problems which are grounded in the real world, let's say, how we say in academia. So, yeah, I'm quite happy that I've been able to have the opportunity to work with policymakers that have been, sharing their understanding of the problems that they face on their day-to-day lives, and how they think that data science could help them, and then trying to have this discussion. I think is very important to see how data science can help in many different real-world scenarios.
I still kind of want to go into one of into one of your projects. So in your most recent published project, I mean, I'm sure you have a lot kind of work in progress projects, but in your most recent published work, you are looking at basically detecting global tourist numbers using publicly available pictures, right, photographs. So can you tell us a little bit more about that project, and how did you get this idea, and what the findings were?
Yeah, so that's a project that I was working on when I was at the University of Warwick before coming here at Exeter. So the project was led by Professor Tobias Bright and Professor Susie Mote at the Data Science Lab at Warwick Business School. And so in this project, we were interested in trying to use data that was available online, in particular for a social media platform known as Flickr, which is a photo sharing platform. And we were interested in seeing how we can use this data to try and measure some aspects of human behavior. In particularly, we were interested in trying to estimate, or see if we could estimate, statistics of traveling or tourism traveling across the world in many different countries. So the idea is that Flickr is a photo sharing platform where users can upload a photo, and when you upload a photo, you can decide to share the location where that photo was taken. And so the idea was, well, if a person, say me, I always upload photos from the UK, then most likely I am a resident in the UK. And then if all of a sudden, for a week I start uploading photos from, say, France, then I am most likely visiting France in that week. So the idea is, can we reconstruct the trajectories of users on this photo sharing platform and work out where they normally live, which might not necessarily be their country of origin. So I'm not British, but I live in the UK. So we can see where you post some of the most photographs from, and that's where you can assume reasonably safely that you live. And then if you start uploading pictures from a different country for a limited period of time, most likely you're a tourist in that country. And so we did this on a large scale. We analyzed about, I think, 69 million photographs, which correspond to about 500,000 users, because people upload more than one photograph. And we tried to see if we could, reconstructing these trajectories, we could estimate the travel statistics for many different countries. In particular, we looked at countries of the G7, so like UK, Germany, France, Italy, and so on. And indeed, we found that these estimates based on photographs shared online were highly correlated with the estimates coming from the official statistics, which is collected by each one of these countries. And so this project, was successful in showing that this, kind of correlation existed between these two estimates, let's say.
So obviously, at the moment, we have kind of completely crazy situation with tourism, right, and with flights and everything else. The majority of people are basically living in quarantine conditions. So are you planning a follow-up of this study this year, just to maybe look at, where, how, the sentiment maybe of kind of wanting to go somewhere but not being able to affects people's decision? Because the way, also I guess an interesting question is, where do you quarantine, right? Do you quarantine with your parents, or do you stay, because normally people, all grown-up people don't live with their parents? So are you planning to kind of do a follow-up of the study?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, because there's a lot of interest in, let's say, the data science community in particular, people working, let's say, in this area, on how we can use these methods or data science techniques to help with the coronavirus crisis. And particularly also it's important, I guess, to highlight the fact that one potential advantage of using the kind of data that I use is that they are, well, either publicly available, like the one that was in the study using Flickr data, but generally they're data that are collected, let's say, digitally. So for instance, they don't require physical interactions. They're not survey-based data, which might require some physical interaction. So that's potentially, one advantage, one aspect that this kind of data, studies based on this data can have. So one work that I've been involved with recently was kind of not necessarily exactly the same as that study, but was quite linked, was looking at how we can understand mobility patterns during the current crisis. So, of course, the way people move around and how much they move around can have an effect on how much the disease spreads. And so there's lots of researchers that have been working with data derived from mobile phones, because as I said earlier, data from mobile phones have very accurate location information. And so using this data, can we try to understand whether people are actually moving less or not? So I've been involved in a study looking at the UK. And so we had access to location-based data from mobile phones that was kindly provided by a company called Cubic. So it's also important to highlight that it was all aggregated data, so we didn't have individual level information on a specific user. And we were interested in seeing, okay, how much or how much less are people moving in the UK since the coronavirus crisis started, and then even more since the lockdown measures were introduced in the UK. And indeed, we were able, to show that actually the restriction measures have brought down the levels of mobility significantly. So there's, I think compared to what you would normally expect to see, people are moving about 80% less. And so this study was able to show that, this kind of data can be used to understand how much people are moving around, which in turn can then be fed into epidemiological models where people try to understand how the disease spreads.
You already started to talk about your current projects. So one question that I wanted to ask you about current projects is what are you working on now? Maybe you can mention something else apart from COVID study. I'm sure that you work on more than one project. But I'm particularly curious about what project makes you kind of most excited. Like what keeps you awake at night? What is it that you're currently doing? Yeah, that is really exciting.
Yeah, so there's, I guess, as you say, there's a few projects that I've been working on, but one thing that in a way is linked to the study on coronavirus mobility, but is, let's say, more broad in a way that I'm kind of very interested in at the moment, is that of how we can study and understand cities and how we as people live in these cities and how we experience cities. So, of course, as probably most people know, there's like an increasing levels of urbanization in the world. There's larger and larger cities and urban environments kind of across the vast majority of countries in the world. And understanding how these cities develop is very important. But I'm also particularly interested in how, not only from an urban planning perspective, so how the cities develop in terms of building and so on, but also I'm interested in understanding how people living in these cities perceive these environments. So it's very different, or I think there is some difference in terms of whether, how we design a city and then how the people that live in it actually experience it. What do they feel like? How do they experience it? And, what are their perceptions? So for instance, I'm interested in, I'm working on and trying to see how people of different demographic groups, so say people, younger people compared to older people, do they experience cities differently? Do they move around cities differently? These might have different impact or different applications in terms of how we understand cities and therefore how we design them. It also has links, I guess, with the study on coronavirus. That's why I was mentioning, because of course different demographic groups are affected differently by the disease, for instance. But in general, I'm really interested in trying to understand how people experience the environment and they live in, and how that relates to how they behave and how they move around. So that's definitely one thing that I'm particularly interested in. And other things that I'm working on and I would like to keep working on it more in the future are using data from our interactions with technologies, as I said, mobile phones, but also social media, and how that can help us better understand our behavior. I think there's a lot of potential, for instance, in understanding aspects about our mental health, for instance, and how that is related to how we use social media platforms or online platform or smartphone apps and so on. What can we learn about our mental health and in relationship with the use of technology and social media?
Mm-hmm. In your work, you have used a variety of different models, and you work on kind of complex networks, and image recognition, and computer vision, all sorts of things. So, from your experience, what would you say is the future of data science? What is the next big thing?
Yes, I think that's a very interesting question, because I think there's going to be quite a few things. So. As you said, I have worked in the area of a complex network. So these are systems where you really look at the interaction between different elements, so say different people, and what is the behavior emerging from these interactions. I think these are very useful tools that are going to become even more useful and become applied in many different disciplines. I think, in particular, they are already proving to be very popular at the moment, again, with the coronavirus crisis, because interactions are really what kind of can enhance the spread of viruses. So understanding how these systems interact is very useful. And so I think network science is going to be even more popular, I think, in the future. And potentially it's also links and with tools from artificial intelligence. So somehow the link between these two disciplines could bring forward even more new methods. And then I think there's lots of potential still for applications of artificial intelligence to many problems. So there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of success stories, if you want, about neural networks and convolutional neural networks and reinforcement learning and all of these things, and that's great. But I think there's even more success stories to come from the application of these. I'm not particularly expert in this, but I think, for instance, things like natural language processing in the future, kind of future years, will have even more success stories coming from tools of artificial intelligence. And so I think these applications are going to have even more success stories.
I'm glad you touched on interdisciplinarity or cross-disciplinarity when you were answering the previous question. So I know that you have some amazing ability to work with people from completely different fields. So can you tell us how do you manage that? Like, because people speak even different language normally. Like in my experience, I worked with people from different fields. So the first thing, I guess, you're trying to find a common language, and the interaction is quite difficult at first. So how do you manage to have all these successful collaborations with people from different fields?
Yes, I think that's an excellent question, actually, and I think it's very important for data scientists to be able to work with people from different disciplines. I would say perhaps one of the most important things, if not the most important, is an ability of listening to people from other field. And what I mean by this is an ability of knowing that whilst you might have the expertise in data science and the tools for data science and programming and statistics, you might not have the expertise of a different field. Say that you're working with a historian or a psychologist or an economist. You have some expertise, but you have to have the ability of being open to listening to what they have to say, because say that you're working as a psychologist, there's a whole literature in psychology on all the research problems that have been tackled so far. And if you want to work with them, you have to be able to listen to what they have to say, what the advances are in their field, to try and include them in your collaboration. For instance, say that you want to use data science to understand specific aspects of our behavior. There's lots of tools that have been developed in psychology, lots of surveys, lots of questionnaires that have been designed to measure specific aspects of, say, our behavior. And you have to be open to saying, okay, these tools have been designed by psychologists that know what they're talking about. I'm going to take these aspects on board in my project, and I'm open to using these tools even though I'm not familiar with them. And then at the same time, I guess there has to be the same listening skill from the other side, and I think in terms of the data scientist, the skill has to be an ability of presenting and explaining your research or your results in a very simple and understandable manner, because in that case, you are the expert in analysis of the data. So you are the expert in the kind of message that the analysis can tell you, and you have to be able to convey that message to your collaborator in a different discipline. Say again, a psychologist or an economist. You have to be able to say the data tells us this. And only this. So you can't make claims on something else, and you have to be able to explain this to the person in the other field, because often maybe they don't have the expertise to understand the methods, and therefore don't really know what message can be drawn, what conclusions can be drawn from the analysis. And it's not necessarily their fault, because they don't have the training in those skills, which is perfectly fine. So you have to be able to explain that to them.
And also, I want to kind of come back to the promise that I made at the beginning of the podcast. So not only you managed to work in this interdisciplinary teams, but you're also one of the organizers of DataBeers. And I know a lot of people from different fields come to these meetings, right? So can you just tell those who don't know what DataBeers is? Can you tell people what it is, and just explain how it works?
Yeah, so I think one of my passions that I haven't mentioned yet is also I'm really keen on engaging the general public and not advertising is not the right word, but presenting,
popularizing.
Popularizing, yeah, exactly, the data science research across different disciplines to the general public. So DataBeers is an initiative that I've been involved with for the last few years. So it was started originally in Spain, now it's spread across the world. And the idea is that it combines two things that we as data scientists are typically very passionate about. It's data and beer. And the idea is that they are short events where speakers from all sorts of places, so university, different departments, different disciplines, but also industry, government bodies, charities, from all sorts of places come and present very briefly research using some form of data. And then the presence of beer also makes the environment, the atmosphere quite friendly. And so these talks are encouraged to be very friendly and very fun and engaging. That's why they're really short, so that the catchphrase is that I think the talks are 7 minutes long, and the catchphrase is, well, if it's not very good, you only have to listen to it for 7 minutes. It's not very much. And if it is a good talk, then you can ask questions afterwards. But the idea is really to bring people together from different backgrounds, so that they find an opportunity to talk together and discuss together about different aspects or problems or applications of data and data science research and challenges. And it hopefully is a way of kind of creating a common language, or trying to make different people start talking a similar language, so that you can tackle problems and collaborations together.
Yeah, that's an awesome initiative. So I recommend people who are not familiar with DataBeers definitely try to attend these meetings. The meetings are open to public, So I don't know whether you are running during COVID, probably not. But once we're out of quarantine, I guess.
Some of so as I said, there's DataBeers events all over the world, and I think some of them are actually running online. Mm-hmm. So there might be some of them running online, but I'm not sure. But for sure, they will start again once
once we're out of quarantine. Yeah, awesome.
Yes.
So we're almost at the end of the podcast, and this is a traditional question I ask all guests, and this is normally the question that most guests complain about. And, the question is, if I ask you to recommend one book and one film, what would your recommendations be?
Yeah, so I can see why people might not like this question, because it's a challenging one. But I think if I had to pick one book in, let's say, this broad area that we've been talking about, a book that I particularly enjoyed, and I think it's a good book. It's a book called Linked. It's been written by Albert Laszlo Barabasi, who is one of the world leading researchers in the area of network science. And the idea of this book presents ideas from network science. Therefore, it's called Linked because networks are really interested in understanding the links between different people. And so this book talks about how we can understand social networks, so interaction between different people, using network science. How we can understand the spread of diseases. I mean, this book was written about 20 years ago, so this is before coronavirus, but still talks about these things. How we can understand the structure of transportation networks, or the structure of the internet, which again is a network. So it's really, I think, a really fascinating book to learn a lot of things about networks. And then if I have to pick a movie, so it's not necessarily a movie, it's more of a documentary. But I think the documentary by Google's DeepMind on AlphaGo is an excellent documentary. So here at Exeter, I teach artificial intelligence, and I actually show clips of that documentary to the students at the beginning of the course. So for those that are not familiar with this documentary, it's a documentary about the project that Google did on trying to beat the world best player in the game of Go, which is a board game, which was considered to be incredibly difficult to solve, and particularly much more difficult than chess. And Google tackled this problem and actually succeeded in beating the best player in the world at the time. And the documentary just kind of documents this journey, and it really introduces very nicely a lot of concepts of artificial intelligence. So I think it's an excellent documentary to watch.
Oh, thank you so much. Really great recommendations. I also can recommend the documentary and the book. Definitely, these are also one of my favorites. Definitely the book is definitely my favorite, and the documentary is very useful, like you said. So yeah, please do check it out. It's great. Well, Federico, thank you so much for finding the time for talking to me today, and thank you for sharing your experience and thoughts with our audience. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks to you.